first I want to talk a little bit about water management in agriculture, since it's water and soil management, and just give you the basics that that water is essential to plants. Right? No plant will survive for very long without water, and as we see this dry season, especially in the south, many farmers are losing their fruit trees, etc. Cherry trees are drying up, especially if they based on the stage of growth. Farmers are losing some of their trees because they need water, because water carries the nutrients from the soil, and therefore if the soil is dry, then there is no moisture for the root to take in, for the plant to survive, for transpiration, respiration, etc. to happen, right? It triggers germination, the process of photosynthesis. So without water, plants simply will not grow. That's a basic, right? The water to supply moisture essentially for plant growth may come from 5 sources, none of which should be ignored when discussing the issue of water requirements. So 5 basic sources plants get water from, and you can't say, well, I am doing irrigation, which is at the bottom, so I don't need to talk about rainfall, right? Because they all work together. So precipitation, rainfall, atmospheric water other than precipitation, or dew, is very important to the plants, right? So then the dew is all the water the plant gets early in the morning, during the night, in the morning, to go through the day, right? Flood water, so when heavy rain falls, and then much of the water don't really get into the soil, it just runs over the surface. And groundwater, that's the water that's in the soil, and they are different depth based on where you're located. If it's sloping, it's deeper than if it's flat lands, if it's close to the coast, etc., when you have different challenges. And of course, then you could apply water through irrigation, right? Grenada has practiced in the past mainly rain-fed agriculture, meaning the farmers just depended on rainfall, on the dew, etc., to water their crops, to get crops for the market. And that then was very seasonal. So they would plant their corn at a very specific time, their peas at a very specific time, their potatoes, their yams, etc. And in the past, we didn't do much vegetable production. Right? And then when we started to get into vegetable production, we still was seasonal. So there were times when the farmers there would be no cabbage, no lettuce, no tomatoes, etc. in the market, because it was dry and the farmers would take a break. Maybe at that time they gone cutting sugar cane or working on the estate, harvesting cocoa, etc. So, but we have moved away from that because rainfall only provides some of the water required for a crop productivity, especially when different crops need different quantities of water at different stage of their growth and fruiting, etc. Right? Some crops need a dry period to produce fruit. Some need a lot of water to keep them moist, etc. So river flow, if you're close to a river, it may provide, in some cases, all the water you need. So you could have an irrigation system and you can get water if you're close to a river, and you can pump or you can do gravity fed, etc. So in Grenada's instance, irrigation is one of the best options, and it's depend on climate and on soil. Climate meaning if in the rainy season you don't need to irrigate as much as in the dry season. And then of course your soil type. If you're in a sandy loam, you need to irrigate a lot more, because you lose much more moisture than if you're in a clay loam or in a clay soil. So you have to take that in. What type of soil you have would determine how much water you apply to your crop. Irrigation has been all around for as long as humans has been cultivating crops. It's not a new technology. So sometimes I hear people talk about new technology, and it's not a new technology. It's just how you apply it has changed. I mean, I'm sure you heard about the hanging gardens in Babylon and all of that. It was irrigation. They take water from one location and they brought it to another location, right, to supply their crops. So it's not new. Man has been using irrigation for millennia, thousands of years, across Africa, Asia, Europe. In fact, here in Grenada, we have all remnants of the farmers, of the crop plantations bringing water from far away through the canals, etc., up to where they need it on the estate. So it's not new. And it's basically the process by which water is brought to land through any of a variety of means. You could take a bucket with water in your hand, you irrigate it, right? Because you are applying water. So even though you're using a bucket or those with the jug with the sprinkle, with the nozzles, it's water. Supplying dry land with water by any means of like ditches, you have ponds, you have rivers, you have pipes, you have pumps, all of that make up the whole issue of irrigation. And it's a vital means by which production can be sustained in various areas. So the idea with irrigation is to have sustained production, right? Because we know water is important. So you have sustained production. You don't need to break and say, well, it's too dry now and I don't have water. If you have irrigation, you could keep producing, keep cultivating. There are 4 basic principles for good irrigation. Apply the right amount of water to the plants in the soil or the media that they are growing in. So if you're not growing in soil, you could grow in with hydroponics. You can grow in it in some people use different media. There's the sand and gravel and all of that is used. There is the artificial material that is used. But what is important is that you have to apply the right amount of moisture, of water, to the root, to the soils, to the media. A lot of people like to wet the leaf. You know, plants don't take water through the leaf. They expire through the leaf. They breathe through the leaves. Right? The water needs to go to the soil because that's where the roots are. That's where the root is what takes the water up. So you don't need to wet down. The most important thing, you want the water get to the soil. And so sometimes when you apply with overhead sprinklers, the amount of water that really gets to the plant is very minimal because the leaves block it and it falls, you know. So you don't really want that. You want to apply to where you need, the plant needs it. You have to time the water in so that it meets the changing weather conditions, or what we call irrigation scheduling, right? As I said before, different stage of crop maturity, vegetables growing, they need different amount of moisture. So when they are seedling, they need a different amount of water to when they, and then based on daytime temperature, which is important. Right? What time of the day? That's what we talk about scheduling. What time of the day irrigate? Right? Is it a good idea to irrigate midday? Right? So you irrigate early in the morning and in the evening. Right? So scheduling is important. And you apply the water evenly to all the plants. So sometimes you go on a farm and you see those plants down on the edge looking straggly, right? And those in the middle healthy and nice, and those on the edges. The idea is you want all of your crops to be, because remember, you've spent money for every seedling that is there. It costs you something. It's costing you to irrigate. It's costing you fertilizer, chemicals, time, right? Your labor. It has a cost to it. So that's why you have to make sure that you want every plant on your plot to produce, to do well, right? And you apply water only where it is required so that it reaches the root zone of the plants being watered. And that's talking about efficiency, right? Efficiency. So that's why there is a lot of new technology that speaks to the issue of how efficient the irrigation water is being applied. How efficient is your irrigation system? So you can have surface irrigation, which we don't do in Grenada, which is talking about flooding or furrow. That's been done where you have huge tracts of land like rice production and wheat based on the stage of growth, right? Huge acreages. It's cheaper to just let a tractor cut a trench and let the water percolate through the soil, right? And get to the roots of the crop. And then you have sprinkler, which can be overhead sprinkler and micro. We don't encourage overhead sprinkler. It's inefficient. It promotes weed growth. So there's higher labor costs, etc. But we based on where you're located, you can use micro sprinklers. Also with overhead irrigation, it does more damage to your soil, more erosion. It washes away your fertilizer, all of that. So you suffer more losses with overhead. And then you have drip irrigation, which can be the drip tips, drip lines, or emitters, right? And that's 3 different types of drip you have. So the drip system, as you can see, right? This water comes out from this little hole here, and it's going right to the root of the crop. Normally, the distance between these could vary, so they can manufacture them different. You can have them 16 inches apart, you could have them 12 inches apart, you could even get them 6 inches apart, based on what crop you're growing. Right? So if, like, for example, if you're using it in banana, you can request the manufacturer to supply you with drip lines with the right spacing. Corn, etc. Right? So so this one here they were doing, I think this was for watermelons. And then back here, you see the farmer has his water tank, and he has his line from it to his drip lines. Drip system doesn't require great pressure. You don't have to really need a pump based on where you're located. So it's a lot cheaper, more cost effective. It's what they call pressure compensating. It doesn't need a lot of pressure for the water flow through the line. And it could be very efficient. You can use it for sweet potatoes. I think this was in Jamaica. Anybody remember this guy? This was the irrigation engineer from Cuba who had trained a lot of staff in the ministry. Julian, this is sweet potatoes using drip irrigation. Cantaloupe, watermelon, pumpkins. And this was some farmers' plots in Jamaica, where we went to see how they were utilizing drip. All right? You can use drip irrigation for raised beds. All right? So you could have raised beds. You could have you can use it for terracing, etc. Because it's pretty simple to utilize. And then there are different types of sprinklers. There are general types of sprinklers, which are fixed nozzles attached to the pipe. You have perforated pipes, where some farmers have this big piece of pipe, plastic pipe, and then the holes and the hose and the water sprays up. And then you have rotating sprinkler. These are those that go 360 degrees or 180. All right. You can have them in 1/2 inch or 3/4 nozzles. This is like a full circle, so this one will go 360 degrees. So because of that, how close or how far apart you put your sprinklers would also have an impact on your crop growth and productivity. Because based on the pressure, as you can see, so that's why you don't just go and buy a sprinkler. Right? I'm being very general, but you don't just go and buy a sprinkler. You need to know some information on the sprinkler. You know, what is the pressure? How much liters per second or gallons per minute the sprinkler will give? And what is the spacing? So you could have them 12 feet apart, you could have them 20 feet apart. So with a sprinkler system, you need less sprinklers on a plot, because every 20 feet you can have a sprinkler. And what is important that when the sprinkler rotates, the water must cross. The 2 sprinklers, the water from 2 of them must cross one another, so that no part of the field is left dry. Right? So you have partial rotating, you have nozzles that we use more for irrigating fields, plain fields and those kind of things, and it spins and it can throw the water 40, 50, 60 feet. In sugarcane production, these nozzles, it throws, and wheat and those maize, these sprinklers throw the water maybe 150 feet, 200 feet away. But of course, a lot of energy, you need a lot of pressure to do that. All right? And most times you use electric pumps for those. You don't really use gasoline pumps or diesel, because it's not efficient. All right? And then you have micro sprinklers, a micro sprayer. who somebody said they have in a nursery. So you don't use sprinklers in nurseries. You use sprayer because it will if you use too much a heavy droplet, it will kill the seedlings. So you want sprayer like a mist. All right. So there's special sprinklers designed for nurseries, inside shade houses, and there are those for the field where you have more wind blowing, etc., a little more pressure. And micro sprinklers also could go up to 12 feet apart, because when you put them on, they cover a wide area. Much more efficient than overhead sprinklers. You have less weed growth, etc. All right, and the maximum they can give you 250 liters per hour. And the maximum spraying radius is what? 7 meters. 7, that's 321, about 22 feet. And 250 liters per hour. That's a lot of water. One sprinkler giving you that. So imagine you have 10 sprinklers on a plot of land. How much water that area is getting. So that's why I said the time. So how long will you irrigate for is based on, you have to know how much water your sprinkler is releasing. So then that you could time it. You know, if I'm getting 250 liters per hour, then I may need to irrigate only for half an hour, based on what crop you have, etc. Right? Then you have the micro sprayer. They can give you 40 to 90 liters per hour. Right? So that's why normally you would have timers attached to these so that you can program it and turn it, and it cuts off automatically. These micro sprinklers, they normally come on a stick, and they rotate 360 degrees. They don't need as much pressure as an overhead sprinkler, so they don't need a high. Right? This picture here shows you what? Anybody notice anything strange here in this picture? Huh? Anybody? Right? What's going on here? Right? So this farmer is irrigating the road. You see that? Most of his water is falling in the not where he wants it. And that's why, because the distance between sprinklers wasn't taken into consideration, and then how far that sprinkler can throw that water. So basically, the plants that really need the water not getting it. Right? So these are the kind of things you have to pay attention to. Efficiency in using the sprinklers. Right? These here is similar. So you realize the plants closest to the sprinkler is dried, and all those, you see that? All those on the boundary, the sugar cane, etc., is getting. Yeah. Also, the height from the ground. That is important. How high it is. Is it a windy area? Or is there, a windbreak around that's blocking the wind? That will determine the height of the stick that the sprinkler is placed upon. Right? This one shows you similarly. Very inefficient system. But at least these are spaced pretty far apart in this picture over here, so that you can see that you have also the drains where the pipe is running. So any water that thing, it will be trapped there. So you minimize erosion. All right, so that's why it's important on the beds to have these to reduce any soil washes off the bed. It will fall into the drain. You can easily take a spade and put it back on your bed. So let's talk about the water soil management issue. If you look carefully at this picture, right, you will realize this is a seedling and lettuce seedling, and you realize, you see this little point here? That's actually a drop of water. So for a tender seedling like this, if you have irrigation, if you have overhead sprinklers, you could imagine the beating that happens to this. To the leaves. But with the micro sprink, with the drip, the water falls right close to the roots, and this seedling would do very well. So If water is truly life, then land must be the foundation of this life. You can't separate land and water. Right? And then I will go on to say you can't separate land, water, and soil. Soil is the building block for land. Without soil, there is no land. Whether it's rocky or stony, bouldery, or whatever, that's the foundation. Soil, then you go to land. And water falls on land. So you have to understand that these two, you can't really separate them when you're talking about managing water. You can't talk about managing water without talking about managing land. Now, also can I talk about water supply without talking about managing forests? What happens in the forest? What happens high up the watershed? You know, what the farmers are doing up there. That's extremely important because it has an impact. Land is a terrestrial bioproductive system that comprises soil, vegetation, other living things, and the ecological and hydrological processes that operate with it. A lot of words, but basically it's saying that everything that consists of soil, vegetation, every single plant that grows, whether it's a mushroom, whether it's something that's so tiny you can't see it, every living thing, the congori, the earthworm, all of that is comprised of the land. Why? Even the human beings in the cemetery. Because when you die, you go back to becoming soil. So it provides a range of ecosystem services that we benefit. Right? The oil and the gas, all of that has a link to land, soil, vegetation. Right? So it's extremely important, not because the sea is there, beneath the sea there is land. No matter how deep it is, there is land there, and there is processes going on down there. For that thing to turn into oil, it is a process that goes on that we can't see with our natural eyes. Same thing that happens when you put up a plant in the soil. There are a lot of things that happen for growth to take place. Right? Land provides regulatory services. Right? It helps to regulate the climate. So when there's deforestation, when there is crazy stuff going on, land has an impact on climate. It can prevent flood, or it can result in more flood if it's not managed properly. Land can help to control diseases and maintain good water quality, etc. That's very important, right? Land it provides regulatory services. All of you want, when you buy a piece of land, you want your title and deed, your conveyance, because it gives you the right to use it. And we like to say anyhow I want it, but not really true, because what you do impacts your neighbor, right? Impacts the people living downstream. So land provides regulatory services. It also land supplies provisioning services, right? That provides a necessity, such as food, water, timber, fiber, all the gold and silver and all the diamonds that the ladies like when they get married. Land. So don't despise it, you know. Treat it properly. Right? Land is extremely important. It provides a lot of services, and a lot of times we don't see it as a service. We don't see it as a service, but it does. It's serving you. So, you know, when you go to a restaurant, don't you like to be served? Right? And if the waiter treats you really good, what do? You get him a? How much farmers they tip their land, meaning they really treat it properly? How many farmers tip their farm? Right? You give it the right types of fertilizer. You treat it well. you manage your soil well. That is so important because it's providing a service to you that you are benefiting from, right? All the material we need for construction, to build our homes, to stay warm, the clothing you wear, right? The clothing you wear, it's from the soil. The soil helps in that. Yes, man has taken to the technology where they process it, but it comes, the root, the foundation is the soil. So don't despise it, right? The grass that the cow eats, and the fiber and all the material that they eat, it comes from the soil, right? Land. It also provides cultural services. We have recreational things that we do, right? We like to go by the lake, right? You have religious practices, people think. We like to go by the beach. People like to go to the beach, do this, that. And spiritual benefits, aesthetics. We love to see certain views, etc. Some of you like to go up to the river and twine, a river, a lake, and just de-stress and relax. Land provides all of those kind of services to us, all right? But there are a lot of factors that affect land and soil and plant and water management, right? You have the soil slopes, soil types, and the slope, which has a direct impact on use. We don't pay much it's strange that a country that has very, very limited land mass, lots of slopes, maybe less than about 10% of all the lands in Grenada, 78,000 acres, is flat lands. We don't like to talk a lot about land use. There is always an effort to diminish the importance role of land use and land use planning in Grenada, I would say. There's always a fight not to pass legislation, not to impose regulations. And I think it's because many people have an incorrect view of land, right? And a lot of us have the impression that we are going to have control of that land forever. You understand? So we fight to keep control of it. But really and truly, if you don't manage it, you'll have nothing to control of. Right? In April, out of nowhere, a huge rainstorm came and affected Dominica. And some of you saw the images, the destruction. Farmers lost their entire farm. There was huge land movement and subsidence and flooding, etc. So if we don't manage our soil, nature will reclaim it if we don't manage it. Right? So land cover is important. The level of water present in the soil, weather and climate conditions, fertility, chemical applications, all of those things have an impact on yours. If you over-fertilize, you can do more damage to your soils. Too much chemical application. So that's why you have to be careful. You have to read labels, make sure you're applying the right rates, etc., because you can do more damage. Yet you might say, oh, I want to get a great crop, man. I did that and I get a nice crop. But how long you think that's going to be sustained? So managing it is extremely important. So we talk about land use. That's the arrangements, the activities and inputs by people to establish, change, or maintain a certain land cover and land type. Meaning, Grenada has a lot of slopes. You as extension officers, you have a right to tell farmers, listen, you can't do what you want to do here. This is not the right way to plant these crops. This is not the right way to do these beds. And I talk about regulatory service. You have some regulatory powers that you're not applying. Right? There's a Soil and Water Conservation Act that you are responsible for managing and implementing. So I ask you to go and find that document, go and find that act and read it and see what it says about land and soil and water conservation for Grenada. And this thing is older than all of us in the room here. Maybe since in the 1920s that thing was passed. Because the forefathers saw if we don't manage this thing, we're going to run ourselves into problems. Right? So there's a lot of knowledge about soil conservation, terracing, you name it. how you should construct your beds, what kind of crops should be grown, which land should be left fallow or left under forest because the risk is too high. But we think that because we have technology, machines that can go there, we can do anything with it. No, we have to manage it. It's a precious resource with a finite, it's not infinite. If we don't manage it, we will lose it. All right? So this picture here is just show a little research that was done to show you if you don't maintain land cover, what can happen to your soil. So where the grass is, you see the water is almost drinkable. Where there is organic matter, but where there is no land cover, and so many of our rivers, that is what we see after a rainfall event. And it's because somebody up in the watershed is doing something wrong. Some farmer, some landowner, somebody doing construction, etc. Something is going on that is not managed, not regulated. And we see the impact. So land cover is extremely important for maintaining proper land and soil and water management. Land use planning, I spoke about that. We don't want to talk about planning, because a lot of people think that you will tell them you can't do that here, you can't use your land. No, that's not the purpose of land use planning. Land use planning is for management. It's for management. And there are a lot of management things you could do to whether it's flatlands or sloping land, there are a lot of things you do to maintain good land management, good soil management, and still use your land. But a lot of times we don't want to take the time to apply it. And of course, sometimes it's expensive. It will cost you more. But land use planning is important. And I believe we're going to see some movement, and that is going to be the passing of the Land Management Act. It's in draft stage. Right now the consultant has been hired. And I tell you, you as the extension officers, you will have to enforce that regulations. Some people cannot do what they want to do on that piece of land. When you tell a farmer no burning, he's supposed to know there is no burning. When you tell him this is not the way to do a bed across a terrace, he's supposed to know, otherwise he will be sanctioned. Because our land is limited, so you have to manage it. Land capability, that's speaking to the ability of the land to economically and productively support a type of land use without regard for environmental sustainability, right? So, meaning, it may not be the capability to talk about what it can be used for economically to give you back a profit, to give you back an income, right? And then land suitability, and these are, so if you go to land use division, they can show you land capability maps for Grenada, and they can show you land suitability maps for Grenada, meaning what type of crop is suitable for that area. So, can we go source up everywhere in Grenada? Right? Exactly. So the land suitability map will tell you source up because of some of the agronomical, ecological properties. Maybe it's too dry, maybe too much rainfall, right? It's not suitable for them. So not all crops can be grown everywhere in Grenada. So these two factors, capability and suitability, is extremely important. Administration, right? Who really administrates land in Grenada? Huh? Is it Inland Revenue or is it the Ministry of Agriculture? Huh? Right. But most people think that land administration is only Inland Revenue, pay taxes, etc. But administering land. So I'm talking about management, administration and management, decision making and actions taken by landowners about the use and enjoyment of land. It has to be married with all that we're talking about. Capability, suitability, administration, regulatory. They have to come together. Management is important because you see, what you do is going to impact other farmers downstream, other landowners, other users of the river, and maybe the sea, the fishermen. So we all have to work in an integrated manner. Policy, there's a legislative and regulatory framework that guides the decision and actions of policymakers. So I spoke about that. There's going to be policy. We have a land policy. It's going to be reviewed. We have a land policy. The accompanying implementation plan to it was never implemented. And part of the implementation plan was a communication plan to empower you, know what the policy says, know what the policy empowers you as a landowner to do. As a community person, the policy gives you power. And I would have said to you, go and read the policy. It's not a big document. Read the policy, because it tells you everything about land in Grenada from way back to present, and it tells you what are some of the challenges and how we can address them. And then it comes with an act that then seeks to empower it. And the policy speaks to the issue of housing for young people. Yes, it's there in the policy, you don't know that. Housing for single mothers, and it speaks to those issues because it has a direct relationship to land. It talks about the issue of land registration, rights to land in some form of public registry, so that is where inland revenue comes in. Title, parcel-based or deed-based, holders of transfer documents, that's specific for Grenada. All right? That is extremely important. There's a lot of, I think I have a slide on that. Land tenure, that's a major issue, right, in managing land. Right? Tenure, meaning the right to utilize that land. We have a lot of family problems and fights and confusion because there is not proper land tenure, because land transfer didn't happen properly. So that is, I talk to many people, I farm in a piece of family land. But where is your title for it? And then you hear uncle fighting with nephew over, trying to farm a piece of land. So you can't talk about management without discussing these issues. And you as an extension officer, you have to be aware of that, because you may go to a farmer who really doesn't have the title to the land he's farming. How are you going to manage that? How are you going to work with him? Right? We have the Possessory Title Act, with people who have been occupying some land for more than 10 years or something like that, can claim it. And we have people living in America, living in England, in France, Europe, Canada, who gone away and leave their land there, and somebody go and start to work it, and they try to take the people's land and claim it. It's happening. It's a big issue in the courts in Grenada. Right? So that's important. Also, if you own land and you have read the document, read the conveyance, I know sometimes you go and you sign and you read it, it tells you that you have no rights to no mineral or anything that is of economic value that's found in the soil. You know that? Mm-hmm. Huh? Who owns, if there's gold or diamond or silver or oil found, who owns it? Right. So that's important to know. Right? Because some people think that even the water on you doesn't belong to? Right? Even the water doesn't belong to you. You could have access to it. But NAWASA has what? The legal. And now that power has been taken from NAWASA and put into the Water Resources Management Unit. That's going to be established. And NAWASA have to apply to them for permission to get to use water now. You know that. That has been passed. Are you aware of that? Huh? So you as the extension officer, you need to go and read that, because, and they pray their last guys, you need to read that act, because you could have serious conflicts arising because people are ill-informed. And that's why I begin by saying you have to cooperate. Land, water, etc. is one package, especially in small islands. And if you don't unite and cooperate, major conflicts could arise. There is the Ministry of Agriculture, Lands and Surveys Department, who really and truly has power over all lands. If you read the legislation, do you know, and I will share it with you because I think it's something that needs to be addressed. Do you know that all survey plans that are produced in the state is supposed to be signed by the chief land surveyor? And do you know there is legislation that no survey plan should be produced in this country using bearings and angles? Everything should be georeference, meaning latitude and longitude. You can literally go on a Google Earth and find your boundaries if the surveyor did a good job. Because the day will come when inland revenue is going to build what we call a cadastre, a map for all properties on the island. And you should be able to go and click on it on your computer and it could pop up to you. I just want to touch a little bit on sustainable land management. That is the adoption of land use systems, practices that enables land users to maximize the economic and social benefits from the land while maintaining or enhancing the ecological support functions of the land resource. And that's taken from Terra Africa 2010. What that is basically saying is that we have a right to maximize the use of the land, but we should not destroy it in the process. And we could see a lot of that. You can use your land, but it must be done in a manner that will support, even enhance the ecological functions. And of course, you can't deny the social benefits. So for example, in the land policy, it speaks to the issue of if you have land that's located in a historical or culturally important area, you must allow access to it. Not just to the beach, but you may have some artifacts, etc. on your land, and basically what it spoke to, the community can benefit. Because if it has cultural or historical artifacts, etc., you can develop a tourist product. And the people in the community should be the first to benefit from that. All right? So that's it. You try and get a copy of the policy and read it, because it has very good things there to enhance livelihoods, etc. And not just from a crop production, but also from a social, cultural, and other ecological areas. Sustainable land management, it talks about erosion control, conservation and sustainable use of land resources, rehabilitation of degraded lands, so restoring land that was degraded back to. So for example, like Telescope, that land could be rehabilitated. You know, it could replant proper vegetation and have this big scar of where they excavated boulders, etc. You can restore that, right? It could be it's degraded, but better land, water, and river basin management. That's talking about IRRM, Integrated Water Resources Management. Establishment of sustainable irrigation facilities to secure stable water supplies. So talking about having proper irrigation programs where you look at gravity-fed systems, etc. Sustainable forest management and effective reforestation programs. That's critical. And then of use of modern and safe biotechnologies to disseminate drought-resistant species. So we have a challenge with drought now in our island in the Caribbean. Drought is becoming more and more a challenge. How are we going to deal with that? Are we going to just crazily introduce any species? Or are we going to carefully choose what we introduce to respond? Whether it's in vegetables, tree crops, whatever. We can't just go and hear somebody say, boy, that's a good thing, he could take dry period, and you bring it and introduce. No, you might be bringing in an invasive species that could decimate the island. Land use planning and adequate land tenure policy. So I spoke about the issue of tenure, me having the right to land. Sustainable agricultural policies. Sustainable use of scarce natural resources, including renewable sources for energy. Critical. Protection of biodiversity and coping with population pressures. I spoke to the issue of the young population. Grenada has most of our people are under 30 years. They said no, more than 60%. Where are you going to find land for housing, etc., etc.? How are we going to do that? The policy speaks to that. And it speaks to the issue of housing and how housing should be developed, that you as a single mother, etc., you can buy a house, one of those units, and if you, after a while, you develop yourself, you have enough money, you want to move, you can now sell the equity you have in that. You can't sell the land, but you could sell the equity in the building, in the facility, and you can go and buy your own house, etc. So that is extremely important. Coping with, because land use change is one of the big challenges we have, from whether it's from agriculture to housing, agriculture to tourism, you name it. Agriculture to recreation, it's a big problem we have. Estimating soil moisture, we're going to talk a little bit about that. Karim is going to show you all that in the field, but there are different methods, right? I just want to get more specific to agriculture now. You have the field and appearance method, you have the gravimetric method, and then you have the indirect methods, plant indicators, growth measurement, plant color, leaf size, and leaf growth. Right? Do you, as a farmer, as an extension officer, do you really pay attention to that? Leaf size, leaf growth, plant color, right? And managing, so you have soil analysis, the moisture probe method, geophysical method, satellite to remote sensing, tensiometers. I saw in the news we have plenty drones now, and some of those drones could be used for soil analysis. How is that going to benefit the farmer and you, the extension officer? That's a question you need to start to think about. So we've had under the Soil Care Project the National Soil Surveys, which has been completed, and the soils have been analyzed, the database is there, the maps have been produced for different parameters. A lot of you were trained, actually. I see some of you in this picture here. The feel, and so you can feel for moisture. There's a technique, very simple, based on the feel of the soil. You can know whether it's dry, whether it's moist, whether it's at wilting point, etc. Whether the crop could survive and how long it could survive. Right? Most of the old extension officers, that was the method they used. That was the method they knew. It's a very critical method to teach farmers and also for you to know. Then, of course, moisture probes. You could push that into the ground, connect it to your laptop or your tablet or your phone, and you get readings. Then you have tensiometers. These are tubes filled with water that you insert into the soil, and it could give you readings. Remote sensing. As I said, we have satellites or drones that could help us with the analyzing soils. And then mulching, and these are important. Contour drains, fertigation, organic matter application. Understanding how to apply fertilizer. In fact, part of the training that we will do is how to interpret the results from the lab. So when you get your results from the lab, in fact, the head of the lab was trained in that. He shouldn't just give you some numbers and etc. He should tell you what quantities of fertilizer to apply, etc., how regular, etc. He got some training in that. Oh, Karim, you too? Yeah, Mr. Forsyth here got training in that, right? And then, of course, you have the knowledge management sides where all of the soil information we put into a database, what we call the Caribbean Soil Information Systems, where you should be able eventually to go online and see what soil type you have, look at the fertility. That fertility was for then when the samples were taken, but so that's why it's important that you keep doing your sampling. And Cheney, I'm not a soil scientist, but he could speak to that, how frequently you should analyze, you should take your samples, etc. Yes, miss?
So, I was having a lot of questions, if you don't mind. So you're talking about soil testing and soil sampling, right? In my mind, I'm hearing that you have a lab established for soil testing. So, pretty RC standpoint again. What if a root crop was produced, let's say, in St. Patrick's, right, in a particular area, and it was stolen? Now you get that root crop with the soil on it. Can that soil be tested for sample in St. Patrick's to verify that it was planted or it was stolen in that area?
Jenny, you ought to answer that question. That's not my area of expertise. But I don't know if the lab has the capacity yet. Yeah. Right? So the technology is there, but that's why we need to bring our lab up to that level. So I think our lab is at a tier 1 level now, and there are plans to bring them to tier 2 level in the next project, you know, so that they could be able to. So you see how this thing is integrated, right? She is thinking in the right direction, man. I like that. Because the data, the information, is being used to reduce the instances of predial larceny. You can't say you're going to a man thing on you. In fact, it is said that different crops taste, the fruits, etc., taste different based on which type of soil it is producing. Right? You could taste the difference. Right? And then we have the data management tools, where you can use that to help you to make decisions on how to utilize your soil. So there's going to be a decision support system where all the soil information is going to feed into this, and it's going to look at climate, temperature, rainfall temperature, ecology, etc., and help you to make the right recommendations to policymakers, etc. So that's the end of my presentation.